Oh, until we're, oh, there we go.
Okay, welcome Connie Post. Thank you so much for being our reader tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's so good to see so many familiar faces of my poetry community that I love so much. I'm going to be reading from my 2 new books, and I never thought I would say that I had 2 new books this year, but it just kind of turned out that way. And so I'm going to kind of split the time between the 2. And some of you that know me and know me on Facebook know that I had 2 emergency eye surgeries last month for retinal detachment. So my vision isn't super great. So if I pause for a little bit longer than it seems normal, just know that I'm trying to get my bearings visually, but it's much better with my glasses. So let us begin. So I'm going to first read from my book from New York Quarterly Books called Between Twilight. And it's been wonderful working with them. And there's a lot of examination of the in-between in this book. And so I'm going to just start with some poems from Between Twilight. And this one is called What to Say, and it's the second poem in the book. It's kind of an examination of just lots of stuff. What to say. Why speak of sorrow when it slips out of the mouths of the broken birds clutching the telephone lines? Why speak of regret when the black feral cat runs into the hedges upon your turn into the drive? Why speak of rage when the car skids on the slick ice in the opposite direction of your intentions? Why tell anyone about the secret paralysis that seizes you during sleep? Why speak to the rabid moon when the crickets are muted and starving on the dark? This next one's called Directions. And I wrote this when there was no Google in your phone where you actually had to print the directions from, like maps and then like put it on your seat. Directions. I follow the written directions beside me on the passenger seat. I find the house by reading the names of each street. Off the main thoroughfare, I take 2 lefts and 1 slight right. It says if I pass the stop sign, I've gone too far. Weeks pass and soon I know how to get there by instinct. Weeks become years. I no longer look at the signs. Instead, I listen to my favorite radio station and turn each corner without a single thought. The way I turn into you at night, the street lamps blur to skin, the cul-de-sac of your curved back, the curve of your hip bones, and my skin warming into yours. That, of course, for my husband. This one, there's a lot of books, and not a lot, all of them, but about half or a little bit, maybe less, are about childhood trauma. So a little bit of content warning, but just kind of an intro to that is called Entwined. And I do believe our histories are a big part of our lives and how we do or don't make decisions in our lives, whether consciously or unconsciously. Entwined. Your history is tied around your waist like a rope. You fling yourself over the water, but the tire swing beckons you back. You find a foothold, you don't find a foothold, it's always the same. The gravity, the incessant gravity pulling you. You land wherever the rope comes loose. You curse the murky water for hiding the tadpoles with broken tails, the moss that smothers your thoughts. Nobody on the far edge of the lake sees you. You go under, you become the body of water you once hated. You are alone, you are not alone, you are the hue of an unseen self. The water surrounds you like the selective mutism you had in 2nd grade. The photosynthesis keeps you holy while you wait. This next one is entitled Estrangement. And there's a statistic that I read when I was looking into this, because it's not really very written about or talked about, that at any given time in the US, 27% of people are estranged from a family member. Estrangement. It's not like it happens suddenly. You step off a curb, agree to take a little time away, maybe take a trip to another city. You look out the window of the bus as the streets pass by. A few weeks go by, a small building collapses. Then it's months and a road buckles, and the signs reroute you to a small town. A metal bridge sways in the distance. You are not sure you can cross it again. You live in your house made of clay and sin. Every day the river runs higher to the underside of the bridge, and soon 20 years of silence has passed. You watch a burning city from far away and notice a pigeon flying towards you, gaining speed. I apologize, pulling the sky's edges with it, finally landing, carrying its message to an unmarked grave. Give me 1 second, please. I'm sorry.
Take your time, Connie. We all have those moments.
The heat makes my asthma a lot worse, so I'm also struggling with a little bit of that. It's a great combination, right? Visual impairment, a little bit of asthma. Anyways, this one's called autoimmune, and I have at least 2, probably 3 autoimmune diseases. And I think it's fascinating that our body finds a way to turn against us. One part of the body turns against the other, reacts as if an enemy has invaded. The war against friendly fire goes on for years, possibly decades. One doctor after another gives pills in doses unrecognizable to your broken mouth. Late at night, you read one medical article after another, trying to understand why the armed forces attacked a sovereign place in the body. You toss, you turn, the siege goes on. You sleep, you love, you banish yourself from your own bed. You watch yourself line up words inside your mind, a small army encroaching from afar. This one is about a river in Washington called the Chehalis River. And I was close to it when I went to AWP this year. And it was very surreal for me. And it's about my dad. River call. Why don't I just take a drink before? Preemptive strike. River call. You took your boat out on the Chehalis River and caught sturgeon with your brother who was dying of pancreatic cancer. I think of you, Father, holding up the prehistoric looking fish, your hand in its mouth and that half smile, half sneer. After twilight, you took us inside the cabin, put aside your cores, cut the meat from the bone and sawed through the coarse skin. You spoke to me through gritted teeth. You told me that soon the waters would be too heavily fished and there would be too few sturgeon. You told me your own father used to take you fishing before 5 a.m. after a beating the night before. For years after you climbed out of our bunk beds, you left at dawn with a car full of whiskey and drove to the dark lake near our home, searching for your ancient self, as if the fish were still hiding from you in that deep, sandy bottom. The lie. I think we've all probably told lies for reasons when we grew up that we probably didn't understand till later, but this is my story about that. The lie. When I was in 2nd grade, I told a girl on the playground that I lived in the hills surrounding our town. I told her I lived with the wild animals and I slept under a tree each night. For decades, I never understood why I told that lie. For decades, I forgot her name. Now, when I think about my father and his shadowy exits and entrances into my room, I think I was trying to tell her about claws and teeth and the sound of growling that comes from behind a tree. I was trying to tell her that I understood the sound of brush rustling in the distance and how a small girl figures out how to hide in abandoned caves, learns how to stay still so not a creature can hear you breathe. These days, I scatter blessings and dry leaves amongst the mourning wolves. Mourning is M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. When I was in 8th grade, I kept a list of everyone I hated at school in my diary. Occasionally, if someone was nice to me, I'd cross off their name. In winter, I discovered that my mother went through my diary. She told me I've never seen a child with so much hate, and she shook her head and walked away. At home, I often beat up my older sisters. I hid in my bunk bed. I cut the eyes out of my dolls. She has such a bad temper, they would say in other rooms. I didn't understand it either. My father loved me so much he couldn't leave me alone, so much that I was sequestered into the slanted rooms where all the doors disappeared. Sometimes when I kicked holes in the walls, my father would patch them up for me. I merely had to hand him the spackle and he would smooth it all away. I can no longer find those old diaries. I have no lists, just a box in the garage with some loose blank pages and a doll I never named. This next one is called Citadel. And oftentimes in trauma, we disown ourselves or our parts of our body, and this kind of addresses that. You'll notice there's a lot of this is not your body, but then there's a way that it is your body. Citadel. This is not your body. It does not belong to you. It is not the one that left the sallow rooms of home circa 1980, never to return. This is not the body who entered the hallway of a college dormitory and knew not a soul, who carried English books like a soldier carries ammunition. This is not the body that left the same college town pregnant with a son, with a man you knew who would someday leave. This is not the body who gave birth and bid farewell to a womb who carried 2 babies. This is not the body who falls into anesthesia and counts the stitches like shame. This is not the body you return to each murky dusk. This is the body you were told to smite. This is the body you hid inside. This is the body you cradled. This is the body that knows the sound of a belt removed before a beating. This is the body that knows how to leave, like a song rising from nothing, like music rising from a cathedral. This next one is about, so after I survived childhood, there was a woman who was the mother of my first boyfriend, who was my first husband. And even after my divorce and my first marriage, we were close until she died. And her name was Rita, and she was the most amazing human being that I feel like, you know, at the end of Titanic, she saved me in every way a person can be saved. That's what the old lady says. Bent sky. This was after she passed. I watched the eclipse from your gravesite, but I watched it from the wrong angle. Remember the one we saw in 1991, I asked. I told you I missed you. I told you the baby turned 3 and the house hasn't sold yet. But the grass wasn't listening and I couldn't think of anything else to say. So I pulled out my special glasses. Isn't it beautiful, I said. And you nodded yes from behind the sun. I only looked at it once. It's what you would have wanted. The rest of a day, I spent my time meandering around the yard, pondering the distortions of a bent sky, thinking about the moon turning black. This is one more about Rita. It's really hard. I was in charge of managing her estate at the end. And one of the hardest things when you're saying goodbye to somebody is the house, saying goodbye to the house. So it feels like a part of them and a part of history is lost. So this is called Dwelling. The money for the house sale landed in your bank account today. I saw the dollar figure and thought only of a small yellow house down a long gravel road in Yuba County. I've saved all of your paintings and the portraits you did not finish. I've saved all the letters your parents wrote to you in the 1950s. I don't visit your grave often enough. I trip over the divots when the grass is wet and land face forward in places I am not welcome. I've saved the last $7 from your wallet. It is the only part of your estate that has not been inventoried. I called the water company to cancel your account, and they told me the new family is already there. I see them washing their hands in your stainless steel sink. I see them opening the front door when the sun comes up. I see them stacking firewood for the long winter ahead. I felt really betrayed that they lived there. And the first thing I did when I went to the house after she died was to wash the dishes in that stainless steel sink. So there's something about that sink. I'm going to close with a poem from between Twilight and then go to Broken Metronome. My daughter has 2 children. They're my grandchildren, which everybody knows me on Facebook, so knows how much I brag about them and post pictures. But Jake is now 9, so this is Jake, and it was an unexpected pregnancy, but an unexpected joy. So to my 26-year-old daughter, you are sitting in front of me 2 days before my hysterectomy, telling me you are having a baby in July, asking questions only the moon can answer. The wooden grain in the kitchen table runs in the same direction as the conversation. We sort through 1,000 ifs as the kitchen light flickers. I move a half-empty glass away from surgery instructions that tell me no food past 9, only a sip of water, no jewelry, no aspirin. I am telling myself I will be fine. All surgeons know how to remove items from the body. Tumors, blockages, hidden prophecies. I am bidding farewell to a knotted house of cells, ramshackle after years of being empty. But it was your first home, your first warm universe void of Saturn or satellites, where you held out your intricate hand and stepped into your first dance with gravity. You making your own constellations, you forming, emerging as celestial bodies do, quietly changing the galaxy as if to say, I'm here. So that's between Twilight. And I'm gonna switch to Broken Metronome. So this, I'm gonna show you the cover. Broken Metronome is a chapbook about my brother, we had 5 kids, very close in age. He was my younger brother, and he unfortunately passed in last April, a year plus ago, from Parkinson's. His type of Parkinson's had a very particularly virulent form on his cognition and dementia, so it was really difficult. And this book is in tribute to him, and so I'm very happy to be reading some poems for him. And so the last 7 months of his life, I lived the hospice thing, and I know a lot of you have been through that, know how hard it is, but it's also a tremendously intimate time in the lives of that person as well. Underwater. And this is the first poem in the book. It kind of opens the scene. At swim lessons in the community pool, we clung to the same ledge, kicking our feet, listening intently to our instructor while elbowing each other under the water. I watched the teacher. I watched her so intently that when I looked over to my right, you were suddenly submerged. I didn't understand until then what it meant to come close to drowning. I saw your face, and maybe you saw mine. You sank lower and lower until a swift hand plunged in and pulled you out of those chlorinated depths. You came out sputtering. We never spoke of it after that. I didn't think of it much until today, until I signed into the front desk of the nursing facility. I poked my head into your room and watched the way the Parkinson's pulls you under. I sit by your bedside. This time, my whole self plunges in. This time, we both hang on. Searching. There's always a period where you for like, what's the cause and all the whys. This is a brief poem about that. Searching. Scientists search for a cause. All I can do is comb the literature like a student cramming for exams, trying to map the way back to your first symptom. How can we know what decisions a body will make for us? How can we know how long a mutation will keep a secret? How can we know where your mind is when you no longer speak? All I can hold on to is the memory of your hand in mine when we first went to Sunday school and believed in everything. So as a lot of you know, when you're going through a medical thing with a family member, a lot of medical jargon is thrown at you. And of course, it feels kind of sterile. And I always feel like there's all this stuff that goes on underneath the technical language. So this is a poem that addresses that. It's a Parkinson's glossary, and it's a response to it. Parkinson's glossary. Ataxia, a movement disorder marked by loss of balance. You fell again today. Dementia, a decline in memory of intellectual functioning. Friends ask, isn't he too young for that? Facial masking. The face is immobile with reduced blinking. I wonder what you are thinking. I hope you can hear me. Hypokinesia, slow or diminished movement. I try to move slowly with you like when we practice for the 7th grade dance. Rigidity, abnormal stiffness in a limb or other body parts. I tell you to remember how you felt when you rode your bike every weekend. Dopamine antagonist, a class of drugs commonly prescribed in Parkinson's disease that bind to dopamine receptors and mimic dopamine action in the brain. You've been given everything that can be given, the doctors say. End of life care. Care given to people who are near the end of life and have stopped treatment to control or cure their disease. You, a bed, and music you used to love. Every time I used to go see him, I would play that Jim Croce song, I Had to Say I Love You in a Song. So of course now every time I hear it, I kind of fall apart. But it became about the music. And there's a poem in the book that I didn't print, I should have, but I also made him, we're Italian. And the only food he would eat at the end was my lasagna, which is really damn good, I have to tell you. But that was the only thing he would eat at the end. A lot of you that know me know I have a son with profound disabilities named Thomas, and he lives in a group home that was 2 miles away from my brother Cliff's group home. So for this long time, I drove between the two, which was his own experience. 2 miles apart. I drive between the two places, ignoring the gas gauge and the narrowing roads. My son in one group home and my brother in another. My son has never spoken. Autism took his language decades ago. My brother's voice fades away like a church bell in the distance. I stop at a park along the way, the grass tamped down from a kid's bike, small signs of loss in its insidious tracks. I will bring my brother good food and music he likes, and he will turn away once the hospice nurse arrives. I will bring my son a Coke with extra ice, and he will drink it all in a few minutes. Each time I visit, I hurry through each yellow light, knowing there isn't enough time. But I make my way between these two quiet countries, find tranquil roads with low-hanging trees and small, silent creatures who show me the way. Bedside. I don't count your respirations per minute any longer. I don't look at that little blue hospice book that spells out the shades of your illness. An ending is an ending, no matter how many minutes drip by. It's the middle of the week. I put on my N95 mask and sit close to you. I turn on the same soft piano music, and the notes float next to the absence of our conversation. I read the dementia patients hold on to old memories. So I enter the realm of 50 years ago and take you with me. I talk about the tadpoles we used to find, the dinosaur trails we made in the dirt in the backyard, and about G.I. Joe when dying was only pretend. Something that can happen in, I only have like 3 or 4 to go, that can happen in Parkinson's is something called contracture, where the muscles become very rigid and stiff, and it's actually very painful for them. And so they put them on a lot of the high-level meds. Contracture, a fixed tightening of muscle, tendons, ligaments, or skin. It prevents normal movement of the associated body part. The nurse increased your fentanyl patch today. It will take up to 48 hours to take effect. In the meantime, you continue with breakthrough doses of morphine. I think about the small gathering of trees outside your window. I wonder if at dusk they secretly tell you how to keep your limbs intact and yet learn to bend with the wind. This one is, the book's actually split into 2 parts, and it's like a lot of before he died and then some of the ones after he passed. This one's called Respirations Explained, and this also goes again to kind of the language that you give to things that are happening. So I'm having a little blur moment. Okay. The hospice nurse gives it a name, Cheyne-Stokes breathing, an abnormal breathing pattern where the patient has first shallow breaths and then deep, heavy ones. She explains it's the body's way of trying to correct itself when everything is shutting down. For days, we watch you fall in and out of the cadence of endings. The nurse says it's not painful, but it's hard for me to believe as I watch you fall in and out of the broken metronome of this fatal disease. I say your name quietly several times an hour, and although you don't respond, I remind myself that the literature says they can hear you even when they are unconscious. I remind you of all the times we collected daddy long-legged spiders, how at times you held them in your hand, each one pushing up an unknown surface, as we all do. And then in the book, there's a blank page that says this blank kept blank to left intentionally blank to note the moment of your passing. Pardon me a moment. So this is after he passed. It's been 1 week since you died. And so it begins the counting, the months, days, and years without a brother, as if the counting can contain the lost, as if somehow it helps me measure the immeasurable. I walk in my neighborhood, and although you never walk these streets with me, they seem somehow emptier, or my footsteps are heavier, I'm not sure which. I only know that 1 year minus a week is 51 weeks. Maybe soon I will only rely on integers, numbers not divisible of themselves, to understand how to let you go. Until then, the dusk waits for me. After the dog is finally asleep, I flick on the bedroom lamp and find the secret abacus under my bed, slowly teaching me how to count myself backwards to you. So I just have 2 more. Me and my brother, probably he was a year under me, so we fought a lot, and we laughed about it a lot later years, but we fought a lot. And we, like when we play Monopoly, it would be like the Monopoly pieces flying up in the air, and then the same with chess. But we just had these very intense chess matches, and I remembered that a lot after. The last time we played chess, I threw a rook at you before I stomped out of the room. We were teenagers. Now that you are gone, I can't stop thinking about your quiet approach, placing each pawn out one by one. I watched your fingers lightly touch the chess pieces, showing how you understood the intricate balance in the power of the board. I think of your fingers in the last year of your life clinging onto the bed rails, how I placed your hands gently on your blanket after you'd gone to sleep. How could we have known then that death would have its own strategy? How could I have known how regret jumps over everything else like the knights on the board? I can no longer play the game. I am no longer willing to glue together broken bishops and bereft kings. I fold the chessboard the way I sometimes close a book before it's over, dog-earing the pages as if I'll remember the way back. And then I'll end with a final poem in the book that there was a red-breasted robin that was building a nest shortly after he died. And it was, I think it kind of started right when that process, but I didn't notice it until a certain time, as the poem tells. So at the end of the reading, before I read this, I'll post a little how to reach me if you want a signed copy and other ways if you would like, but I'll put that in the chat. Robin Redbreast. All through your illness, I wake to the sound of birds. I ignore them. I don't care about the type, kind, species, or if they are far or near. I just get dressed and drive to see you. 2 months after you die, a red-breast robin makes a nest in the hanging plant just outside my bedroom window. I watch her carefully. I go to the window countless times a day and make sure everything is okay. I worry at night about the eggs and if they will still be there in the morning. I read grief books. I watch mindfulness videos. Nothing helps. It's a Sunday in June. It's a Sunday in June. I watch her until noon. She stares ahead, doing her silent work. I see now how someone comes back to you, oftentimes in a small shelter just beyond your reach. Thank you. And thank you for your patience while I kind of struggled through some of the copying and the visual part. I'm going to, so there's my email. You can email me or go to my website or go to Glass Lyre. Oops, I did that on a private chat. Hang on a minute. That was my mistake. There we go.
That's lovely, Connie.
Yeah, so Connie at poetrybills.com. If you want to sign copy, it's really easy, or just go to glasslyrepress.com. I mean, you could find it through all the usual channels, both of the books. Thank you so much. And thank you, Yanina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike is here, so he can give you the proper